Greetings from the Garden State Council. My name is Daniel Palolo. I am the Lenape Lodge OA Chief. Citizenship, leadership, and fitness are some of the foundational principles our Scout Oath and law is built on. The Garden State Council presents leadership lessons from leaders in the Scouting movement from here in South Jersey and beyond. We look to explore what it means to be a leader. We will hear from leaders in various fields about how Scouting's leadership skills have equipped them to be successful in their lives and careers.
Hello and welcome to the virtual leadership series presented by the Garden State Council. My name is Patrick Linfors and I serve as the Scout Executive for the Garden State Council. So I was asked to produce a video on the topic of Scouting leadership, and just as a young person doesn't become an Eagle Scout without leaders who support and encourage them, the same goes for a Scout executive. So I thought the best way to talk about leadership in Scouting and this career was to bring in some of my mentors for a conversation. So we have a very special guest with us today. Wayne Brock retired from the BSA in 2015 as the 12th ever Chief Scout Executive. He served as our National Chief for 3 years. Wayne began his Scouting career back in 1972 as a District Executive in New Bern, North Carolina. He served on the staff in Knoxville, Tennessee. He served as Scout Executive in Athens and in Orlando, Florida. He was the Regional Director in the Southern Region, and then he also served as Assistant Chief before becoming Chief Scout Executive. Wayne is a recipient of the Distinguished Eagle Scout Award. He's a Vigil Honor member of the Order of the Arrow and a recipient of the Order's Distinguished Service Award. And one of Wayne's most dubious leadership choices was hiring me in the summer of 2005 to be the newest district executive on the team at the Central Florida Council. And we worked together for 6 months before Wayne was selected to be the Southern Region Director. Wayne, welcome to our virtual leadership series.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Glad to see you again, Patrick.
Yeah, great to see you, Wayne. So the folks that will be watching this are most likely youth members of Scouts BSA or Scouts BSA volunteers. And so the topic here is leadership. So why don't we start there? And what's your definition of leadership? How do you approach that subject?
I think obviously to be a leader, you got to be able to get people to follow. And so I think a good leader will set out a vision, something that he can get other people to buy into and follow him in whatever that is.
Excellent. So, when it comes to actual Scouting program and our youth program, for young people in Scouts BSA, what does leadership look like for them? Maybe what are some tips and tricks you would recommend to those that aspire to be patrol leaders and senior patrol leaders and take other leadership positions in a troop?
I was a senior patrol leader, and I was a patrol leader, those experiences. My son was, and it was definitely a learning experience. The first time you put into a position to be a leader. And so first of all, you got to be willing to learn. You got to be having an open mind as to what you need to do based on the particular situation that you're addressing. But the main thing is that you be honest, you be forthright with people, you spell out a vision. Really, you got to embody the Scout Oath and law if you want people to follow you.
Excellent. And thinking about Scouting's impact on youth for the future, what's so unique about our program is that, we're creating an intangible, right? Our product is the future, right? This character education program for young people that's going to build them a foundation for the future. So what are some of the things that young people should understand about how Scouting can impact their leadership ability in the future, whatever they choose to do down the road?
Well, I can just tell you from my own personal experiences. One thing it did for me, I give you an experience that I had when I was in the Order of the Arrow. And we had what we call the quest one weekend at a fellowship. And I was the chapter chief. And we were supposed to, during that weekend, do scouting type activities, waterfront, aquatics, the rifle, all the things that you normally do at camp. And we had competition. And at the end of the day, Everyone had built up the most points in each competition was the winner. And we were right at the very end of the last event of the day, and it was a 4-man relay. And we had found out who was going to get to do it, so that everybody get to participate in an event. Well, all we had to do was place first, second, or third, and we would win if in one of those things. However, we didn't have our fastest runners lined up to be in the relay. So I started getting lobbying, if you will, from members of the chapter that we ought to change out the ones that were there and put in the ones that were designated to run and change them to our fastest runners. And I had to, that was a real dilemma for me. I mean, it made a real impact on me, 16 years old, knowing that if whatever decision I made, somebody was not going to like it. And so as I went through trying to decide what to do, I went to my chapter advisor and asked him for advice. And he says, Wayne, you're the chapter chief. It's your decision. You got to do what you think is right. So you know what I did, and this is the truth. I sat down and I thought about the Scout Oath and Law. And I thought about being trustworthy and being loyal and the things that scouting stands for. And when I did that, it just made it so clear to me what the decision ought to be. And that was the decision was let the ones who we told they could run, because they had not had a chance to be in any event. As it turned out, we got third place and we won anyway. But I was willing to take the grief. It meant we did it because I just felt like it was the right thing to do based on what I learned in scouting. So that, and looking at the future, you're going to be faced with decisions that you have to make. Now, I've had been, as Chief Scout Executive, you very well know, facing some very major decisions that affect the whole Boy Scouts of America. But in every decision, what I did is I applied the Scout Oath and Law to whatever that decision was. And it's worked for me throughout my career. And my advice to them was to do the same thing as they look to the future.
Sage advice, sage advice. There's a lot of wisdom in the 40 words of the Scout Oath and the 12 points of the Scout Law from age 15 all the way through, no doubt about it. Yeah. Thinking about this career, you know, I'm sure you've had conversations like I've had with whether it's a young person on summer camp staff or somebody in the Order of the Arrow, and they go, wait a minute, scouting can be a career, this can be a job, this can be something I try to do. And you know, in having those conversations, you know, if there's a young person out there that has interest in our profession as a career path, you know, we're a small dedicated group, but obviously you and I are great examples of it can be a career, it can create a great life for you, and obviously have a tremendous impact. What are some of the recommendations that you would make to a young person thinking about this career in terms of leadership and what you look for in hiring folks and what we're looking for in our movement?
Well, again, you're looking for people, I think, first of all, what a person is inside will come out in the way that they lead, the way they do other things. And so you got to have that basic foundation. You believe in God, the things that you have a moral sense of what's right and what's wrong. And so as you're going into this profession or really any other profession, again, and I just keep going back to the same point, is that you have to be able to lay out a vision and a vision that people can buy into. And then you have to live up to the expectations of what that vision might be and get people to follow you. Now, when I say that, there's also times where you don't have a chance to bring in a lot of opinions. You know, I tried as much as possible when I was leading, was to engage the group in the discussion, try to come up with a group consensus as to what we should do. And I think most of the time that is definitely the right path to take, because that's a good way to get people to buy into whatever you want them to do, to have them a voice in that decision. But there's also times where there's not time for a voice. Yeah, you're faced with an emergency and you've got to make a decision right then, and you just have to go ahead and do it. And that's when you've got to make sure you've had the right training, everything that it takes up to that point. So just as you look forward to have that foundation for you and be willing to adjust based on what the circumstances provide you. I mean, it's hard to put exactly how it's going to be. You have to experience it and make your decisions as you go along.
Excellent. Well, I should share a couple of thoughts as well. In the short time we had together in Central Florida, but then certainly in your leadership positions at the Southern region and as our national chief, some of the lessons I learned just by watching you is, part of being a leader is listening and asking questions. And even as a scout executive to a brand new district executive, there were times where you asked a question because you wanted to know my perspective through the eyes of a new district executive, whatever we were talking about. So, leadership, there definitely is the skill set of listening and asking questions and being inquisitive is certainly a key trait of being a leader. The other thing I wanted to share with you was in my office, I've got this whiteboard where I write quotes on the board. And if it's a great quote, I leave it there in perpetuity. It never gets wiped off. And somewhere along the line, I figured out that one of your great skill sets as a leader was to, you ever heard the old story about Vince Lombardi? Vince Lombardi would always start the new football season with, tell the guys, he'd pull out the football, this is a football, right? And get real granular and real basic. And I heard you define scouting one time in one sentence. And I wrote it down and I loved it and I've used it ever since. And it's the way you described it was scouting is experiencing a thrill, overcoming a challenge, and helping one another in a meaningful way. Experiencing a thrill, overcoming a challenge, and helping one another in a meaningful way. And I always love that definition because it's like, this is a football. Don't forget that this is what scouting is.
Right. Well, I don't remember making that statement. I wrote it down and brought it back. But it is so true, and particularly about questions and listening. That's what I meant about getting everybody involved. A person can certainly buy into what you're trying to do if they have a voice in that. You don't always have to do what they say. I think most people just want to be heard. They want to have an opportunity to say what we're going to be doing, and just to be listened to.
Absolutely, great stuff. Was there anything else you want to share with the Garden State Council audience here on topics of leadership or anything else?
Well, just want to thank them for all of you, whether you youth, the adults, what you're doing in scouting. For those of you who are considering it as a career, it is a great career. You get real fulfillment having known that you will touch the lives of literally thousands and hundreds of thousands of young people through your leadership in the scouting program. So I do encourage any of the scouts out there that may be thinking along that path, follow it. It is a good path.
Excellent. Well, Wayne Brock, the 12th Chief Scout Executive of the Boy Scouts of America, thanks for joining us here on our virtual leadership series.
Oh, it was fun.